sportsradiodetroit.com.
Someone said football, so I come running. What's going on, everybody?
No chance in Bingville. Can't see my dance. You want to see the new Tweeter end zone dance? Check it out. You know what it's called?
What?
New Tweeter end zone dance.
Nice. Nice. Nice.
Lions SRD on sportsradiodetroit.com.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Lions SRD on sportsradiodetroit.com. OTAs have wrapped up. Minicamp is kind of wrapping up, and then guess what? After that, it's training camp. Getting kind of a recap of what was going on. There is major news that has happened. We will get to that, obviously, and it does involve one of our topics and one of the Lions' probably most irreplaceable players, but we'll get that into a second. Marty, OTAs are done. Minicamp is wrapping up. What are some of the things that have gotten you excited just reading the rumblings and hearing things about Lions and OTAs?
Well, yeah, you know how I have kind of an unhealthy obsession with the big Jared Davis. I'm still not sure how to say his name. Like I said, I keep hearing both ways, but the big thing I've been seeing is he's been a smooth transition. Like, he's picking up the defense fast. He's already taken on a leadership role. Guys are already looking at him, you know, granted through OTAs and mini camps and all that stuff. They're already looking to him to kind of be a leader, which to me is great because, like, you know, like we've talked about before, Ben, that was the guy that I wanted. Mm-hmm. And it's great to see him making those strides. It's great to see Tabor doing what he's doing. I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, with Jared Davis, it's exciting. They need a guy in the middle that can really control the defense, and in my opinion, they haven't had a guy like that in decades. I mean, I'm talking like Chris Spielman. So, you know, it's one of the things that when you hear something like that, it's encouraging. One of the things that's been really encouraging with OTAs is Kenny Golladay. A lot of people that scout these players for a living said that he was pretty good catching the football, but throughout camp he's been catching it like he's a Venus flytrap. He's not really putting anything on the ground. He's already solidified himself as one of the top 3 or 4 wide receivers on this team, allegedly. Now, granted, all that comes with a grain of salt because in OTAs, everyone looks amazing. Everyone's making plays. Everyone looks awesome. When you're in the druthers of a season, that can tail off when there's more tape on you and everything like that. So the thing that's interesting, though, about Golladay is that there's also been news that Jared Abadaris has been very exceptional. He and Jace Billingsley are battling, and I know a lot of people, when they heard Maclin was cut from the Chiefs, and then, you know, Decker was released, you know, from the Jets, that these are people that the Lions should look at. Marty, I know you were kind of interested, and I equate this basically to how we viewed the running back position in the draft, right? It was something that everyone was saying, you need to take a running back. You need to solidify that position. And after the draft, it was clear Bob Quinn wanted to see what he had in known quantities and unknown quantities in Amir Abdullah, but he already knew what he had in Riddick, Dwayne Washington, and the like. And he felt pretty confident. He just wanted to see what that ace in the hole in Amir Abdullah was like before he decided what he needs to do at that position. Do you think that could be something he's doing with the wide receiving core? Because a lot of people, CBS Sports in particular, basically says Eric Decker is still a fit. Now, granted, the Ravens are looking for wide receiver help. They did take Maclin. They signed him. And people are also saying that Decker could fit with the Ravens as well. But what are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts when you see a guy who's a very solid possession receiver? I mean, Eric Decker, when he was in Minnesota in college, he was very, very good. Made the transition into the pros, kind of. And when he was in Denver, kind of just became an everyman, and still basically filled that role with the Jets. And now he's basically looking for a job. How do you see the Lions approaching this?
Well, I was only interested in Macklin kind of as a knee-jerk reaction, just because I know what that guy can do. But I kind of looked at it as we really don't need him. Like, it was just a flashy kind of thing. I was like, well, we drafted Galladay. We've got Tate. We've got Jones. We've got Ebron. We've got Aberderis, who, we talked about at the end of last season. I'm very high on Aberderis. He played really well with the Packers, so I'm kind of excited to see what he can do. We've got Billingsley. I mean, the pantry's pretty full at receiver.
Yeah.
So my interest in Macklin was strictly knee-jerk reaction. Once I had time to sit and think about it, I really didn't want anything to do with him or Decker. Don't get me wrong; they'd both be nice additions, sure. But I don't want to see us spending our money in a position that I don't really feel we need to address. You were talking about how Galladay's looked like a Venus flytrap, and I feel badly because with work I haven't been able to see everything's going on, but I have seen. I think it was 20 Men was even reporting that Galladay's looked really, really sharp.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be nice. The guy that I really want to see improve, that I want to see leaps and bounds. I want to see Ebron leaps and bounds. He should be. I don't want to say the best receiver out of them all, but he should be no worse than number 2 behind Tate, because he's the guy that they kind of need to see that from. We know what Tate can do. We think we know what Jones can do. We saw it for half a season.
Right.
We kind of have an idea of what those guys can do, but I really want to see leaps and bounds from Ebron.
See,
but as for Decker, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's funny that you say that, though, because honestly, my guy I want to see grow is Jones, is Marvin Jones. Because I see Ebron as a solid 3 or 4, obviously, because just the position that he plays.
Right.
But with the way that Jones started out, thought he was going to be really, really good. And all of a sudden he disappears into nowhere and only appears in a couple of games. So, I mean, I think out of, that, you want to expect a guy like Jones, a guy that you spent a lot of money on and, was arguably the number 1 wide receiver last off season available, with the way that he ran routes and the way he can catch the football when he was in Cincinnati. You want to actually see that develop. So I just thought it was interesting that you would even put Ebron that high, and rightfully so. But I mean, Ebron's a big body. He's one of the biggest bodies on the team. He's a guy that has an issue with drops, having 9 drops last year, the most in the league. So, I mean, it makes sense. But to you, Ebron's a number 2 option instead of like a 3 or 4.
Right, because I kind of look at Marvin Jones and I don't want to say this. It's not entirely accurate, but I can't think of a better way to say it. Jones is kind of a one-trick pony. He seems to be like, you can only throw downfield and hit him, and that's fine, but you can't be throwing downfield 40 yards every time. So that kind of negates what he can do. Whereas we know what Tate can do over the middle. We know what he can do on short routes, slant routes, all that stuff. I want to see Ebron step up because I'm a big tight end guy. I love it. I mean, one of my all-time favorite players is Mark Bruner and Heath Miller from here in Pittsburgh. Both guys tight ends, completely different style of tight ends. Bruner was a traditional blocking tight end. Miller could literally do it all. And that's kind of where I want to see Ebron take his game to, being a guy that can do it all. And a lot of times people don't realize, the Steelers had Burris, they had Hines Ward, they had, this plethora of wide receivers over the past 10, 15 years. But the one constant was the tight end, Heath Miller. And that's where I want to see Eric Ebron go to, because I think if you have a legit tight end, that passing game becomes, just ask Tom Brady. You have a legit tight end, that passing game becomes so much more deadly. You don't even need stud receivers. That's just frosting on the cake.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you can get solid contribution, especially from a guy who's a vertical threat like Eric Ebron is, yeah, that's just going to open up a whole litany of options for you, because it's very apparent the Lions have potential in their wide receiving core and their tight ends. It's just, it needs to come to fruition, and obviously something that can also help that is the running game. But I know you wanted to make an additional point on Eric Decker. Do you remember what that point was?
It was just I just think he'd be a bigger Golden Tate. He'd be a guy that can go in, move the chains. He's not going to do anything flashy because that's just not who he is.
Right.
But he's going to be solid. He's going to get you those first downs. He's going to get you the tough yards. He's going to be a taller Golden Tate guy you can rely on. A guy that's he's going to make all the right plays. But like I said, man, I want to see what we have at receiver right now. I'm glad we haven't signed anybody off the street other than Kamar Aiken. But whatever. I don't really think he's going to be anything special either.
Yeah. And let's go basically from one Decker to the other Decker. So it's going to be a double Decker episode, basically.
Oh!
Taylor Decker, as we all know at this point, is out indefinitely. And a lot of people were kind of speculating as to how long. And when the Lions just initially signed Tony Hills, a guy who's played on half the teams in the league, and I wish I was exaggerating, but I'm only exaggerating by a little bit, by the slightest of margins. You thought maybe the injury's not that bad. Well, then you get the news on Thursday, really big news, about what the Lions did. But first, we all know what the injury is. It is a shoulder injury, and Decker was arguably, next to Matt Stafford, one of the most irreplaceable guys on this Lions team. I mean, there's no qualms about it. Having your left tackle go down hurts. And Decker was one of the best offensive linemen that the Lions had last season. And when they drafted him in the first round, he was supposed to be there for a while. He was supposed to keep growing. He's supposed to get better. And then this happens. And it happens all the time in football. And you can't really predict injuries or anything like that. But it forces the Lions to look in-house first. They looked at Corey Robinson. They looked at Joe Dahl and Cornelius Lucas. And Joe Dahl, for the most part, was really filling in that void and doing it well. When he was drafted, Joe Dahl was being worked out on every spot in the offensive line, center, guard, and tackle on both sides. And with Decker going down, he was working primarily at left tackle. Now, here's what the interesting thing is, and it's what happened on Thursday. The Lions went out and acquired Greg Robinson via trade from the Rams for an undisclosed draft pick, which we found out later on Thursday was a 6th rounder. And they signed a free agent in Cyrus Hulangio, who played not only at Alabama in college, but played in Buffalo and started at left tackle. Now, here's the interesting thing. Ty Schaller, who writes for Lions Wire, he and I have, I guess you can say, a friendly rapport on Twitter. He posed an interesting scenario right when Decker first got injured. He thought the Lions should trade a 2nd-round pick to New England for Nate Soldier because you would get possibly a compensatory pick back. You could spin off Soldier and basically solidify your left tackle position. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and I think it goes to show how smart Bob Quinn is. One, not a lot of people saw this move out there as a potential move that they could make. No one was really talking about it. But here's the interesting thing with Robinson. Robinson, you only have to pay for 1 year, 1 season. Greg Robinson is on the books for about $3.6 million. And then after that, he gets an option. Now, you can pick up that option if you want. That's fine. And this is a 1st-round, 2nd overall pick at one point. And a lot of people, and this is one of the picks that the Rams got when the Redskins tried to trade, or not tried, they successfully did trade for Robert Griffin III. And a lot of people are calling Greg Robinson a bust. But here's why Robinson is a perfect Band-Aid fit. 1, he's low cost. 2, he fits the Lions scheme a little bit better than you think he would. He's a good to respectable run blocker, and Bob Quinn has said for weeks and months how he wants to improve the running game because when you improve that, everything else improves. And you don't just do that from getting a good running back. You need your wide receivers to block, and you improve the offensive line. And Bob Quinn, in his first 2 seasons, has entirely revamped this Lions offensive line, and he was thrown a major wrench in his plans when Decker got injured. But Greg Robinson can step in, Kuan Gio can step in, fill that void. And if you like what Robinson can do, here's something that's interesting. Robinson can also play inside. Robinson, a guy who's 6'5", 300 pounds. You can play him at any guard position you want. So here's the other beauty about picking him up. TJ Lang is in that locker room. TJ Lang, as we all know, is very good at what he does. You hope he reaches that potential, but if he doesn't successfully heal from that hip injury, guess what? You can throw him right next to Ricky Wagner on the right side, and you can still have Taylor Decker and Graham Glasgow to patrol your left, or whoever at that point. Or you can even have Decker and Robinson patrol your left. Graham can work on working, center guard, with Swanson in case Swanson gets another, concussion and he's out for 4 games. You have so much flexibility now. And once everyone's healthy, this offensive line is pretty good. I mean, that's just my thoughts on it, Marty. What are your thoughts on what the Lions did on Thursday?
I liked it. I liked it better than mortgaging the future, as it were, giving a second-round pick for Nate Solder. There's no guarantee that he would want to re-sign in Detroit once that contract was up. And, that's not something you want to gamble on for a team that needs those high-round picks. And let's face it, Detroit, until they actually become more consistent and then, you can look at them and say, okay, they're going to go to the playoffs, instead of being, well, they have the potential, but will they get there? I'm tired of being that team, so I'm glad we didn't go out and give up that second-round pick.
And the best part is, too, he's cheap. He is dirt cheap. I mean, $3.6 million? Not bad. Plus, with an option, I mean, if you want to keep him, you can keep him at an option, for next year. You can sign him, to maybe like a $4 or $5, maybe $6 million, a year deal for that option, and still kind of keep that preventative mark, because it takes about 2 to 3 years for rookie offensive linemen, to mature through and become an NFL and offensive lineman. You basically see if they're good enough to be an offensive lineman in the NFL. It gives times like for guys like Joe Dahl and Graham Glasgow and anyone else that you draft time to acclimate and become potential fits in that offensive line. And it's just, but that's why it's just so intriguing, because now you have all of these options at left tackle. So, you have contingency plans one way or another. We don't know if Taylor Decker's going to come back this year. I honestly think with what they did, signing 2 left tackles, I think Decker's done for the year. And the reason why I say that, I don't say that as a bad thing. I say it the same way and I see it the same way they treated Amir Abdullah. It's a tricky injury. You get surgery for it. You rehab for it. And then you know what? You just make sure you're healthy. You make sure you're healthy through the rest of the year, and you come back strong, fresh in the offseason. Because at this point, you have that flexibility to do so. Now, maybe Decker responds and he's ready to play. We heard from Amir Abdullah and his camp that he was ready to play as soon as week 8 or week 9, maybe. And, he was eligible to come back, I think, last season in like week 11 or week 12. But the Lions are like, it's okay. We don't need you for the last 5 weeks. But in hindsight, it would have been nice, but it also makes sense. You want to let these guys get fully healthy, especially if you have long-term plans for these guys. So, I mean, that's just the way I see it. Marty, when do you in your head anticipate Taylor Decker becoming available for the Lions again? Or do you think, like I do, that the Lions are going to just put him on IR and either reactivate him mid-season, which they could, or keep him or keep him on IR for the rest of the season?
I think he'll be back as soon as possible. Because here's the thing with, I was watching NFL Network today, and it was either Mike Garafolo or Rappaport, both guys who I have a tremendous amount of respect for. They're both so good at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
I forget which one of them said it. They said point blank, the biggest issue for Robinson is he's still young enough where he can reach his physical potential. It's between the ears. And that's why the move to Detroit works so well, because there's an offensive line guru plus the veterans that are there that can help him potentially reach his potential with the mental part of the game, because the physical tools are all there. But they said for Robinson, it was a mental thing. And let's face facts too. He was out in St. Louis. There was really nobody else on that line with him. He's the number 2 overall pick, so he already has ridiculous expectations on him, which that happens when you're the number 2 overall pick, regardless of what position you are.
Right.
But when there's no other solid offensive lineman there, and you have that clout, you have that second round or second overall pick, tag, automatically you're going to be the whipping boy. And I think that's what happened there. I think he just got so beaten down from being quote unquote their best offensive lineman, or potential best, however you want to word it. The expectations were there for him as opposed to anybody else. And I think that's why the trade was made to get him here, is because it benefits both parties. St. Louis gets a draft pick out of it, which who knows, that 6th round pick might turn out to be nothing. Who knows? And
Right.
Greg Robinson might turn out to be a steal, and it might just turn out to be a Band-Aid. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. But I think the forgotten factor in all of this is we have a first rounder that right now he's an unknown quantity. Laken Tomlinson. What is he going to be doing? Is he going to be just riding the pine? Is he going to be cutting camp? Where does he fit in all this? Because you're hearing about Joe Dahl. You're hearing about Decker. You're hearing about Wagner. You're hearing about all these guys, but the one guy you've heard nothing about is Tomlinson. He's another one. I want to see what they're going to do with him.
That's a great point. And that's something that when you look at the depth chart, that's a name that does kind of stick out as a red thumb. It's something that you look at and you're like, okay, what do they do? And that's the funny thing too, because Glasgow was already starting to overtake him. And that's the thing. He's becoming an afterthought because you do have, Glasgow, you do have a guy like Greg Robinson. I was kind of surprised when I heard that, and I heard this from a lot of, local people, that he would be better on the inside. So maybe you groom Glasgow to be your center and you move Robinson at, like I said, left guard, and you have a pretty formidable offensive line at that point when Decker comes back. You have Decker, then Robinson, Glasgow, and then you have TJ Lang, and then Ricky Wagner. I mean, that is a pretty darn good offensive line that the Lions have not had or seen in forever. And I'm talking even days of, like, before Barry Sanders was a Lion, because Barry Sanders was facing people in the backfield, shucking and juking and jiving, and then finally getting past them. I mean, the Lions really never truly had a really solid offensive line. And if you think they have, I'd like to know what you're having, because you are not feeling any pain. So, I mean, we're talking like close to 30 years, if not longer, for the Lions, to have a really solid offensive line. And if you can actually get that and maybe develop a running game in some form, who knows? I mean, maybe the Lions do become just, instead of this outlier for a wild card, maybe they do become something, anything at this point. So the possibilities are great. Like I said, every time in OTAs and in the offseason, everything's awesome. Everyone's Super Bowl contenders. And I know that's what we kind of sound like right now, that the Lions could, be a very good playoff contender. We're not. I know I'm definitely not saying that, even though the possibility's there. But it's intriguing to see what they do in Marty. I really do. I think it's interesting that, this move probably means Laken Tomlin's gone.
I think so.
If they move Robinson inside truly, you're right. Tomlinson might be the odd man out here.
I had done another Detroit-based podcast the year Tomlinson was drafted, and I went on there and we were talking about it, and like he was one of the more surprising picks they made in the first round in the past couple of years. Because one, you don't need to take a guard in the first round. You just don't. But so when they took him, it was kind of like it was strange. It was kind of like, okay, we're working on the offensive line, but a guard, like really? And it was really strange. The three of us sat down, we were talking about it. It was one of those picks where you're just kind of like, you know, we see what they want to do, but really, like this kid coming out of Duke, like, ugh, it was just kind of weird. So he's kind of like the one first round pick that I can look back at, you know, since Mike Williams, I guess would be the last really, really sketchy first round pick that I kind of look at and go, that was kind of a wasted pick because, like I said, I just don't think you ever take a guard in the first round because I think you could find one. I don't want to say you can find one anywhere, but you get where I'm going with it. I mean, you don't really need to take a first round pick. So it was just kind of one of those picks where it was just really strange, and I'd hate to see him get the axe because he was a first round pick. But at the same time, you know, if he's not up to snuff, he's not up to snuff. I mean, he'll be fine. He's a doctor, for God's sake.
Right.
He can be a doctor. He'll be okay.
Yeah, oh yeah, but I mean that's the funny thing though too. Like you look at everything that Bob Quinn's doing. He said he wanted to right when he came in. He said he wanted to improve the offensive line, and he's done that so far. It's just how refreshing is it that the Lions are actually addressing weaknesses and turning them into competitive strengths. Like not when I say competitive strengths, there's competition on the team. You know, it's going to be the best man wins. If it's the best of a bad bunch, that's one. You know, that's probably what it is, at least at corner. But the way that they're doing it is really, really interesting. I mean, the Lions are doing it on the offensive line. They're doing it in the secondary, and like I said, how refreshing is that to you? Just, I mean, you and I are kind of the same, roughly, you know, similar age. This is something I have not seen addressed like this since I can even remember.
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, the Lions always seem to want to hit that home run. They want to get that big splashy player. He's going to put butts in the seats, but you know, it doesn't matter. I'm going to die an Ndamukong Suh fan. I don't care if that's popular. I don't care if it's not. I'm going to die a Suh fan. Do I think he was one of the catalysts to help get us to the point we're at now? But at the same time, it's kind of like, did we really need to go there, or should we have been addressing the offensive line? It was just kind of one of those things where you're right. The trenches is where it starts, and I think the offensive line is where they should have been going pretty much all along. Like you said, it's something we haven't seen. We haven't seen a legitimate foundation because you figure one year you take Ernie Sims, the next year you take I don't know, whatever, Nick Fairley, you know, whatever the case may be. Like it was just kind of pieces as opposed to pieces of the same puzzle. It was just really strange. No real formula to the way they were doing it. They were just kind of going for quote unquote best player available, and you know they've really been hitting that the past couple of years, I think.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing too. We've been talking, you know, hypothetical horizons. Just imagine Matthew Stafford having time to actually go through his progressions and not being on his back. You know, a guy who actually can stand behind a competent offensive line, how much better he could be. I mean, that's why, like, I look at moves like this, and I do the classic dog head turn. I do the huh, because this is like this is the things I think about. If you give a guy like Stafford time, maybe those throws are not a little bit higher than they were. Maybe they're not a little bit lower than they are. I mean, we know Stafford's a gunslinger, so he's still going to throw that wicked sidearm pass that he throws. But if Stafford's not running for his life, if he can actually navigate the pocket and actually have time, and like I said, and actually work with a competent running game, this offense is going to be interesting with Jim Bob Cooter. I mean, that's why I look at something like this, and like I said, I know we're talking about very distant and hypothetical horizons, but that is very intriguing too. Seeing a guy like Stafford actually working behind a competent offensive line because they're focusing on repairing that, and you know Stafford's going to stay here, whether people want him here or not. He's going to be your franchise quarterback. It's going to be interesting to see if he can actually truly reach that potential behind these moves.
Yeah, I agree. And Ben, if you don't shoot for the stars, you're never going to get your head out of the clouds. And it's time. It's time for us to reach. It's time for us to take that next step. And I think if that offensive line gets solidified, you're going to see that Matt Stafford is one of the elite quarterbacks in the league. He's not a fringe guy. People are going to look at it and go, wow, Stafford really is an Aaron Rodgers caliber player. He really is a, insert elite quarterback name here type player. For how many years it was Calvin Johnson bailing him out? Well,
Right.
You're kind of seeing without Calvin Johnson, maybe it was actually Stafford kind of helping Calvin just as much. So I think people are going to really give the devil his due this year. I think it's finally people are going to be giving Stafford the credit he deserves.
Yeah, and like I said, if that helps this team get into the playoffs on a consistent basis, I'm all for it. One thing that's also kind of interesting is it's kind of playing out, and we'll talk about Matthew Stafford, in a podcast that we will do next week, because there will be one next week, and it can very well just be a single topic podcast. But I know a lot of people are talking about, and there was an article about this, so I guess we're teasing this topic to introduce a new topic. But Matthew Stafford says, I'm not waiting on anybody. I'm not waiting on anybody to sign. So that means he's not waiting on guys like Derek Carr. He's not waiting on anyone else. He's going to get his deal, whether whether people like it or not. Now, if that's something where he's making $25 million a year, which would still make him the highest quarterback in the league, is that, it's something that we know is probably going to be eclipsed very soon. But it's just interesting because the Lions are getting to a point where you're going to have to make some tough decisions. And we kind of hit on it a couple of Lions SRDs ago with Ziggy Ansah. But now Golden Tate was asked if he thinks he's underpaid. He just gave a simple one-word answer. What do you think it was? Yep, I think I'm underpaid. Because he does, when you look at it, he is one of the best wide receivers in the league. He's not, he's maybe somewhere in the top 8. He's not bad. You have him asking for money. You have Ziggy Ansah asking for an extension. You have Glover Quinn asking for an extension. And you have Matthew Stafford that you need to, resolve as well. So you have 4 guys asking for this money. We know Stafford's going to be taken care of. What do you do with the other 3, Marty, out of your curiosity? Because the way I see it, Glover Quinn's aging. Even though he doesn't miss a snap at all, he's basically the heart and soul of the defense, and he's the backstop of the defense. He's 31 years old. He's only going to keep declining, especially if he doesn't have any time off. Like last year, literally played every snap on the Lions' defense. So, to me, I don't think you extend him. I think he's the one that you let walk. You maybe franchise tag Ziggy Ansah for a year and then see if you can kind of hammer that out and see if he can return to his old form. Because if you look at Ingram, who signed, I believe it was last week in San Diego, that's going to be the barometer of where Ziggy Ansah is probably going to be making his money, and it's not cheap. So that's why I would maybe say franchise Ansah and maybe throw a little bit money to Golden Tate to use that extension that you would have used on Glover Quinn. It wouldn't be a major extension. It'd be like a 3-year extension, 4-year extension to a guy that is still basically one of your best wide receivers, and use the money that way. When you look at those 4 guys, how do you see that playing out? Because it's a game of musical chairs, Marty, and there's not going to be enough money to go around. At least I don't see it that way.
I don't either. I think Stafford is clearly the number one. I think Stafford's clearly number one for sure. I mean, he's your franchise quarterback. He's the face of your franchise. You've got to get him taken care of, and I believe they will. I think Golden Tate is the number 2 priority because clearly Stafford and Tate have that chemistry. You can tell like they're not the same team when when Tate's not on the field or when Stafford's out of the game for however little. They're not the same offense. So I think you got to get Tate locked up. I actually think Ziggy Ansah should be the odd man out because if they're gonna, and here's why: if he's not worth $66 million, I just don't feel that he is. He's not worth the money Ingram got, because Ziggy Ansah can't stay on the field. And granted, when he's on the field, yeah, he's very productive, but he cannot stay healthy. And so I think a guy that has as many injury issues as he's had, I don't think you could throw that kind of money at him. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't throw the money. I mean, they should try to do what they can. But like you said, there's not enough money to go around. I actually would rather see Ziggy walk than Glover Quinn, because I don't think we have a guy ready to step up and replace Glover Quinn. I don't see it on this roster. Maybe they'll draft somebody next year. Maybe they can hit a home run in the safety position next year. I don't know. Maybe Nevin Lawson can be groomed. I mean, I don't know what their future plans are. Obviously, nobody does. So I kind of feel like maybe Ziggy. Don't get me wrong. I love Ziggy Ansah, but I kind of feel like maybe he should be the odd man out as opposed to the other three.
Interesting, because the way, just the way that I see it, I don't know who you can. I mean, the Lions would have to draft Ansah's replacement. They haven't done that yet, and I don't think Kerry Hyder's a guy who. I mean, he's a complimentary defensive end. He's not the main guy, and you need to have that elite pass rusher to complement it. Now, that's why I'm kind of curious with it, because he's a guy that, while you're right, he hasn't been able to stay on the field all the time, but I don't think he's a guy you can let walk, because I mean, at least for me, I don't see any immediate replacement that you can draft on the defensive line, in next year's draft. Maybe I'm wrong. Granted, I haven't looked at it deeply yet because we haven't crossed that bridge yet. But
right.
I mean, I think with what you've done with Alex Carter, as an example, moving him to safety, Agnew can be a safety. A kid that you just drafted. It's something that I think, and Miles Killebrew is going to be playing more, as a safety role too. I think you have more options at safety than you do on your defensive line. So that's why I see Glover Quinn as the one without a chair when everything's all said and done, unless he wants to truly just stay in Detroit and sign for not a lot of money, which I don't see happening. I think every NFL player is entitled to sign for as much as they can, because it's a non-guaranteed league. These contracts aren't guaranteed. You make as much money as you can before your body betrays you and you have to basically quit. So I mean, that's why I wanted to bounce it off you.
And to be fair, in my own defense, I completely forgot about Carter. That's me dropping the ball. I forgot they moved to safety, but I'm not ready to rely on Agnew. He's an unknown commodity. I don't know what to expect out of that kid. I don't know. I mean, is he a coverage safety? Is he a hitting safety? I don't know anything about that kid. Killebrew, I'm not ready to put him back there just yet either, because he's only had one season. And granted that last season he was really, really good when he was on the field. But again, is he going to be decent at coverage, or is he just going to be a hitter? That's why I kind of feel like Quinn is maybe the indispensable guy. And I'm okay with having, how can I word this? I'm okay with having run-stuffing defensive ends, guys like my boy Anthony Zettel and guys like Devin Taylor. I'm okay with those guys not being quote-unquote elite pass rushers, because I'd rather have a solid defensive line and let those linebackers blitz. I think Tahir Whitehead as a pass rusher would actually be really fun to watch, because he's fast, he's fluid, and he's not going to have to be the anchor of that defense now that Davis is there. So he's going to be able to. He's going to be free, and I think it's going to be fun to see where this defense can go. But we're all talking hypothetical here, and
sure.
To be honest with you, I don't really think any of those four guys. I don't feel any one of those guys is indispensable, or I really don't feel like they can afford to lose any of them. But you pose the question, which one would I prefer to see odd man out, or however you worded it?
Yeah,
that's just my take on it. I kind of feel like Zettel has even said, he goes, "You're going to see more out of me this year. I'm more comfortable. I'm going to be out there a lot more this year," which is great, because I don't want to see one defensive end out there, because when Julius Peppers was with the Panthers, it was him and two defensive tackles, and then the other end was just a guy. So they were able to focus all their energy, and I say just a guy because Peppers was the guy on that defensive line.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see that happen with anybody in Detroit. I want them to be like, oh, who do we block? Do we block Zettel? Do we block Taylor? Do we block Hyder? Do we block Joe Schmo from Piscopo? It does. I want people's heads to be spinning. Will that happen? I don't know. That doesn't happen very often. So that's just why I feel that maybe Ziggy could be the odd man out.
No, and that's completely fair, and that's why I wanted to bounce it off you, because you think of things that I don't think of, and that's why I wanted to bounce it off you. Quickly, before we wrap up the podcast, a couple of house cleaning things. One of Bob Quinn's draft picks is gone. So Jimmy Landis, if you're wondering who it is, that's who the guy is, the long snapper out of Baylor. Jimmy Landis is gone. He was waived on Thursday as part of bringing in Kuinjio and Robinson, and also Arturo Uzdavanius. That's what I'm going to go with. Uzdavanius is also waived. And if you're asking who, again, everyone is. So if you are asking who's that guy, obviously not important. He's not there anymore. So those two guys, unfortunately, will be looking for new jobs. Dan Mulbach is back with the Lions for the 50th consecutive season as the long snapper.
And I'm okay with that because that's tried and true and steady and faithful. I'm okay with that.
Well, that's true, too. And here's the thing. Once they're ready to part from Mulbach, you never know, Landis could still be available. So they could always bring him back, and that could be a possibility.
And a note on Landis, he was the one guy out of last year's draft class that did not play.
Exactly.
Well, I should say that didn't dress because Rudock didn't play either.
Well, no, but he was brought onto the roster. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's one of the things that it was between him and Rudock that basically did not see the field. And, yeah. So those guys are gone. And trust us, we know that with minicamp wrapping up, a lot of you guys want to see the Lions in action. Well, guess what? Open practice dates and times have been announced. Starting on July 31st, you want to get down to Allen Park, you can. Gates will always open 1 hour prior to any start time that you hear. So, they are the following. Get down your pen and paper because I'm only going to say this once. You can also find it online. Monday, July 31st, 3:30, the Lions will open up the gates. Tuesday, August 1st at 3:30. Wednesday, August 2nd, 3:30. Friday, they will open the gates early on August 4th at 9. Saturday, the 5th, will be at 10:30 in the morning. That practice, though, not in Allen Park. That one's at Ford Field. And then to wrap up the practice schedule, Sunday, August 6th at 3:30. Monday, August 7th at 2 p.m. If you want to go down to Allen Park, you want to see the guys practicing, see who's going to make the team, you want to interact with people, those are your dates and times right then and there. So if you want to go down, there you have it. And if you missed any of those, you can find them online. Again, though, gates will open up 1 hour prior to any time that you heard, and there will be activities. It'll give tickets away. They'll give merchandise away. There will be autograph opportunities, photos with cheerleaders, and you can meet Rory if you want. Speaking of, there's also a sale on the Lions website. It goes on until, I believe, Saturday. So if you're still rushing to get your dad a gift on Father's Day, you can go to the Lions website, and you can get updated Nike gear, including if you want to give him a new jersey, because I know Marty got a new jersey. If you want to get a new jersey, you can save money on it, take advantage of it. But that's it. That's all we have. Like I said, we will be back next week. We're going to talk deeper about this Matthew Stafford contract because it's going to be interesting to see how everything starts to play out with that musical chairs, because it doesn't involve just the Lions. It involves a lot of people. And then maybe we'll start looking into other teams in the NFC North, and then maybe just break out the NFC and then look at the overall AFC as we go on through the dog days of summer. But here's the best part, Marty. Football is only like 73 days away, 80 days away. It's very close. It's close. And one last thing, just really, really quickly. On August 13th, the Lions will actually have their game airing on NFL Network at 1:30 as they face the Colts. That is the first preseason game of the season. Obviously, also, the Lions start the regular season basically a month later on September 10th at home against the Cardinals. But that's everything that we have for you, at least for this week's Lions SRD. He's Marty. I'm Ben. And Marty, I'll let you finish it with the trademark. What do we say?
And we say goodnight.